the village of Luis Terry, had an issue with another neighboring village, and there were some clashes. Some of them were turning violent with fists being thrown, and at some point some rifles being brought out. Fortunately, nobody was seriously harmed, but the threat was there. We were thinking, how do we deal with this? How are we going to solve this? Do we have to bring in the government? What to do? Something very profound happened. They stopped fighting. They put down their arms because they all want access to the clean water, and they see that fighting isn't going to get them there. Coming together will get them there. And I think that's one of the most profound impacts that I've seen.
Welcome to Investing in Regeneration. This podcast is about changing how we understand, plan, and finance projects so that finance becomes a driver for better decisions, not just the last step in the process. In each episode, we unpack a real deal or initiative through three lenses: understanding, planning, and financing. We explore how it came about, who worked together, and what needs to change for these innovations to become mainstream. Because the real bottleneck is not capital. It is how investments are originated, structured, and brought to bankability. Our financial systems can do more than financing change. They can help shape it. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Today, I'm delighted to welcome Nancy Santuyo and Samuel Schwan, founder and board president of Rainforest Flow. Since finding her way to an indigenous village in the Peruvian Amazon in 1999, during a journey to access a deeper knowing, Nancy's commitment to improving the health of children and families in the Manu Biosphere Reserve, one of the most biodiverse regions in the world, has only grown stronger. Her can-do spirit, positivity, and deep love of nature are the heartbeat of Rainforest Flow, guiding its vision for more than 20 years. After piloting a culturally integrated water, sanitation, health, and training program in the village of Huacaria, Nancy has scaled and replicated the model in additional communities, impacting positively the health of 3 generations of Indigenous people in the Amazon. She continues to divide her time between the rainforest and collaborating with partners to expand access to essential services. Samuel is driven by a simple purpose: to make the world a better place through service to others. Beginning his career as a firefighter and EMS responder at 18, he developed skills in situational assessment and decisive action under pressure. His journey led him to Rainforest Flow in 2021, where he contributes to community-empowering WASH programs in the Amazon. He believes that access to clean water and hygiene creates a foundation for people to realize their full potential. And it was just great to hear you both remembering that moment that you met. We'll get back to that in a moment. As Paul Hawken writes in Regeneration, a book that talks about an alternative approach to climate action, the root of the climate crisis is a deep disconnection between people, nature, and within ecosystems themselves. Addressing this requires reconnecting these broken strands, moving beyond isolated solutions towards systems change. So in each episode, we will unpack the full investment cycle through 3 lenses: understanding, planning, and finance, exploring how initiatives emerge, how they are structured, and what is needed to scale them. And that is exactly what we will do today with you too. I'm really so happy and honored to have you both, Nancy and Samuel, because we will dive into the work of Rainforest Flow, that I believe is a powerful example of a place-based, community-driven model integrating water, access, health, and ecosystem stewardship, and demonstrating how these foundations enable Indigenous communities to thrive while they do the great and very necessary job of protecting the rainforest. So I think the first thing we will talk about today is the Rainforest Flow model. Nancy, I will start with you. It's a great honor to have you sharing with us about your life work. And I would love to dive into the model of water and sanitation supply you have co-developed with Indigenous communities in the Peruvian Amazon. Could you tell us more about the model you have developed and what are you betting for now after all that experience? Which services are being delivered to communities and how does it impact the present and the future of these communities?
Well, Monica, it's my great pleasure to be with you today, to be with Samuel, and to share the Rainforest Flow journey, the work, the mission of bringing WASH, water, sanitation, hygiene, to Indigenous cultures in the southeastern Peruvian Amazon. That's where we started. That's where my journey led me to Santa Rosa de Huacaria. And what I wanted was to do something good. And what I wanted to do is implement WASH programming that worked, that was in context to their cultural environmental needs. Because what I had seen was many projects came to the rainforest, but they were not in context. And they were developed out of context with the environmental elements that were crucial, right, to achieving success. So I knew that water without sanitation and sanitation without water would only advance the people so far. So we focused on clean water, community-driven clean water. So we first brought clean water to the communities. Then we built sanitation at the school, right? We implemented baseline health studies and health education. And that was, right, unless the practices changed, any project would fail. And then our other element was we developed water committees that were trained to build, maintain, and repair the infrastructure. So that was a model, and the community involvement and the investment that they made within themselves, the community, that over time worked.
Thank you so much. I have noted two important things that you mentioned from all the very important things that you mentioned, but is that projects were developed out of context, right? And that's one of the very important regenerative design principles, to honor place and community and culture, which you do very much, but we will go back to that. And that clean water and sanitation had to go hand in hand. Of course, you had to time it, but that in isolation, they wouldn't do the impact they were meant to do. So this is great. Now, Samuel, I understand that you joined the board since 2021, so about 5 years now, and have invested on the growth of Rainforest Flow. Could you tell me what convinced you to take this step? What is unique and particularly impactful about the model?
So I've been involved with Rainforest Flow as a philanthropist for about 5 years. I've only been on the board for 2 now. I can't take credit for 3 extra years. How I got involved with Rainforest Flow was I visited a village called Luis Terry in 2019. It's in the northeast corner of Peru, quite different from where Nancy was working in Manu. And it was interesting. I went there with a group of folks from a different organization who were looking to help out with possible physical injuries, physical ailments related to diseases. We weren't finding that there, but their biggest ask and request was, we need clean water. We were getting very sick from our water. So me not knowing anything about clean water, I just Googled clean water programs in Peru. And the first two didn't link up with what I was looking at. It seemed to be more urban projects. The third Google result was Rainforest Flow, and kind of seeing what Nancy had going on, it just fit, it clicked, because it was all community-based, and it was listening to the people and what they needed. It wasn't telling them what to do. It was saying, what do you need from us? How can we help you enrich your own lives? So that's what drew me to the program at first, and it's what's kept me around, going from not just an investor, but also board chair at this present time, is because it's something that's not forced down people's throats. It's not a building and leave. It's, where are you at? Where do you want to be? How can we help you get us there? So that's what drew me in, and that's why I'm staying with the program.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I think that you're referring to the agency that people has, right?
Yes.
On deciding their own future. And I couldn't agree more. Many steps. Yeah, unfortunately, a lot of development cooperation and government programs are not thought this way, but I can imagine this was really attractive and impactful. Now, I have the question for both, and please, be like open to alternate, even, flow with each other about, if you could walk me through the theory of change and impact pathway of this model, right? What is the situation taking place in the Peruvian Amazon due to climate change, current economic development models, and wash provision systems that are the norm in the rest of the country, maybe? So how the combination of these three things are impacting communities and their well-being, and how are you making a difference to rainforest flow?
Okay, so the current situation is a desperate need for clean water and sanitation and hygiene programs in the Amazon. I can only speak for our region. Nearly all the projects that are implemented by the Peruvian state don't work. They sometimes collapse or never are even finished. And so that is our impetus there, right? That the need is the people are crying out for clean water and sanitation that's not contaminating the very place that they live in. And I think that, you know, developing these models of clean water, sanitation, and daily hygiene practices that improve their health and well-being, right? Allow the children to grow stronger, the women to regain time from not carrying water from far places. And actually, everything changes, health improves, and the communities can focus on their future instead of on this survival, day-to-day survival where they're sick, and we found that there was diarrhea up to 3 weeks, a month with the children. So the model was to work with the local actors, to partner with the education ministry, with the local municipals, and how could we strengthen the infrastructure instead of totally disregard it, right? Because we knew that they were going to be the long-term players that were going to stay over time. I think the theory, our theory of change was when people are healthy and stable, they can continue their roles as stewards of the rainforest, which, as we know, the rainforest is vital to the health and well-being of our planet, of the health of our societies. And it was really proving that that model worked because it didn't exist. There wasn't a model that was working before we arrived. And so we got to trial and error. We used low-tech systems, gravity feed. We used local resources to build slow sand filtration. And we used things that the people could understand, right? And we used indigenous knowledge, right? They had to contribute the environmental component to what we were doing, right? And then they learned how to lay pipe and build filters, and the children were involved and analyzed their water with a portable microbiology laboratory. So we created a model that I like that theory of change that would empower not only today, but the future generations as these children from our first community that were young children in primary school now are adults with 3 children in their community, and the clean water is still flowing. And not that first community then went on to teach other communities in the region how to do the same. So they built this indigenous network, a water network that supported each other to flourish.
Thank you so much. And I mean, so many things of the model that speak actually to that regeneration paradigm, right? Like empower participation, honoring place and community and the local culture, because I know you didn't mention it, but the whole way you've been working is actually factoring in the local understanding. I really like the understanding part, because I think unless local communities understand the situation, they cannot become agents of it. So this is amazing. And maybe just to go into some more points is that I love that you say solving, the fact that they could have access to water sanitation so that they can focus on the future instead of survival. And I think that already gives. Now, is there a paradigm shift, Samuel, because you were also looking at all the other 3 models in the country and maybe around? What is the paradigm shift that Forest Flow is bringing to the provision of water and sanitation in Peru, in your opinion?
So I might answer this in a little different way, but there's a really strong example of what I've seen that Rainforest Flow has done beyond water. The village of Luis Terry had an issue with another neighboring village, and there were some clashes. Some of them were turning violent with fists being thrown, and at some point some rifles being brought out. Fortunately, nobody was seriously harmed, but the threat was there. we were thinking, how do we deal with this? How are we going to solve this? Do we have to bring in the government? What to do? Something very profound happened. They stopped fighting. They put down their arms because they all want access to the clean water. And they see that fighting isn't going to get them there. Coming together will get them there. And I think that's one of the most profound impacts that I've seen in Rainforest Flow. And just in general, I've been blessed with the opportunity to see projects that other organizations do around the world, some of them specifically in war zones. And I've never seen that take place where violence is stopped because people came together, recognizing the greater good that we can get when we work together. I think that's the big paradigm shift that Rainforest Flow offers. It's not just clean water. It's a betterment of the total well-being of communities in so many different ways. So that's my answer to your question.
I think I love it. And the fact is that I think what you're saying is that I think that's the deeper paradigm shift, right? That we don't have to compete, that we can cooperate. And there can be abundance if we unite our talents and forces. So, no, it's amazing. And I think it also reflects to water as a connector. We always say it, right? But can it really be a connector and almost like the polarizing factor? So I think it's beautiful. Now, I will go into my favorite part. I always like it very much because I know that change doesn't happen unless there are like people committed to that and who are actually dedicating their life to that change. So I know Nancy, I know you have dedicated your entire life to securing access to safe water and sanitation for these communities and developing this model, trial and error. And Sam, I know you have been very generous to support Nancy and the Rainforest Flow's mission. Yeah, I'd like the people who is listening to us to know you a little bit more, like the person, minds and hearts behind this pioneering model. Could you tell us, Nancy, how did the idea came to you? You referred to it in the beginning a little bit, but I don't know, like the moment of inspiration and your own experiences that maybe were kind of awakened by what you saw there and gave you the motivation to go for this.
Sure. I think when I first went to the Amazon rainforest, I went because I was called to a deeper understanding about life, right? I wanted to connect with Indigenous people that still lived connected to life, right? To nature. And I felt like we as a society, me as a person, was losing that connection to nature and its ability, right, to support a greater good. And so I went to the forest. I ended up in Wakadia, the Manu Biosphere Reserve. I didn't even know at the time it was hailed as the most biologically diverse place on Earth. I first went into the communities with books and puzzles and toothpaste and toothbrushes. And then I saw they had a failed governmental project and they were brushing their teeth with this contaminated water. And I was like, wow. And then the school teacher said, what we really need here is water. And I thought, okay, I can do that. And I went back to the U.S. I formed, at the time it was called House of the Children, and began writing grants. And that was the way it started. But it was really about going to learn how to support people from their place of strength and not victimhood. And how do we begin to evolve that victimhood, that said, look at what the outside world did to me. And what I thought was beautiful is that, here I show up in the forest. I didn't even speak Spanish at the time, right? I learned as I went. And I went in and said, your spirit is greater than the obstacle. I understand what happened to you here. I understand you can't trust and how you were encroached upon, but there's something within you that is greater. And if you're willing to walk that journey with me, let's go. That was really, and it was showing up there from a place not of charity, but of partnership, not of short term, but generational, right? And not external, like, look at me, how great I am. It was about community owned and inspired, and that they would go on and teach each other. So it was really quite beautiful. It was relationship, right? That when we took away our borders, that it wasn't Italian or Machiganga or German, right? Yeah, I thought that we were one global tribe, and the deepest, what it was it was based in the deepest essence of love and connection, right? And to support each other from our place of strength. there you have it. You become quite you can't walk the rainforest without becoming somewhat of a mystic and understand of the beauty in which lives within us. Like there is really no separation from the forest, and who we are. So I hope I didn't go off on a
Wow,
tangent here, but
no, this
yeah.
is amazing. I think it's really important because you told us in a nutshell how the whole model now has evolved, right? Because it came from you listening and they being open to tell you what they really needed. And you also looking at the strength already there, right? I must say, I mean, and I don't want to go too deep because today is more about you, but back in the COVID time, I read a book called The Shrewd Samaritan, which is of a guy a professor in America who does a lot of research on development. And he said there are two reasons why people stay poor. One are external, like if do they have access to the technology, money, knowledge. And there is one internal, they think they can't do it. I just saw what was wrong of the work I was doing because I felt we were bringing technology, but letting people feel that they were not able on their own. And I think what you did by saying, you have the strength, if you want to walk with me, we can do it, is actually, kind of like helping them pass that barrier that is their internal belief that they can't.
Right. Because
do it.
What happens is oftentimes in development, we project the word poor onto people. We have never used the word poor in any form from the establishment of the organization in 2000. And I said,
Amazing.
What would happen, Monica? It's a beautiful question. Like, what would happen if we stopped projecting that word onto people?
Yeah.
Because what I found was not poverty. No.
Yeah.
What I found was knowledge and resilience and deep connection to nature. But in a sense, what was missing was, what was missing is that there was somebody that went in there that no longer fed that scenario, fed that old
that narrative,
paradigm.
like, oh,
Right,
yeah.
right.
Yeah,
And I was at the UN once, and I was sitting with a gentleman who was the director of, partnerships at the State Department. And he said, come on, sit down. And I leaned over to him and I said, what if we stopped projecting poor onto people? How would that change how we serve them? And he said, I never thought of that. And that's what I love about our work. And that's, in supporting us, not only in the Amazon, supporting all that enter into relationship with Rainforest Flow. We push against those old paradigms, those old forms that say you can't, right? Right, wrong, good, bad. And I let's evolve that word poverty, right?
Yeah.
So
nice. And now, Samuel, can you tell us a little bit also more? Because I think we have heard from the beginning also how Nancy came to do this. And basically, it has been her whole life supporting this process. Could you tell us more about you, your life, and what do you feel is your North Star or purpose?
Sure. Well, I guess we'll start there. My North Star, my purpose is my Christian faith is the foundation of my life. And that's tells me to go out and help other people. And there's a very interesting verse in the book of Isaiah, chapter 58, verse 14 says, if you pour yourself out for the hungry and satisfy the desire of the afflicted, then your light shall shine in the darkness and your gloom be as the noonday. Not to go into too much graphic detail, I knew a lot of pain and I knew a lot of suffering as a child. Doing work like this alleviates a lot of that suffering. It's very interesting. So going past childhood, I had a career in firefighting and EMS, and I worked with very good people. But what frustrated me was we weren't always able to do what we knew was the right thing. And that's not any one person's fault. That's just what happens when you're working in these larger organizations. And in the end, that's what attracted me to Rainforest Flow is every scenario you go into, you do an honest assessment and you see what needs to be done. And then based off of that honest assessment, you commit decisive action. And nowhere have I seen that done better than Rainforest Flow. And that's so it really, I found a synchronicity with my background because that's what they teach you, right? In paramedic school is you assess what's going on with your patient and then you do action based off of that. Unfortunately, I wasn't always able to do that as a paramedic, but now being involved with Rainforest Flow, both from the philanthropic side and the board chair side, that skill set is really able to come to fruition. So it's been an absolute joy to work with Nancy on these programs and seeing the results that are coming from our work together. Just to finish here with what Nancy was already saying is you meet people where they're at and you take them where they know that they can go. And I think that's the key to this is, I'm not trained in the humanitarian sector or how to run an NGO or anything like that, but seeing what others are doing, even when the efforts are in the right place, the results don't line up with what you're hoping for when you don't meet people where they're at and listen to them and work with them throughout the entire process. I think that's the Rainforest Flow success model.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing, Samuel. I think we share also these faith. And I think actually, like what you say, it comes down, Nancy, to love. I do think I have friends which are Muslim or other. My husband is agnostic, by the way, but we have this mixed marriage because we thought we have shared values and we have a shared view that there are things that are good and there are things that are not good, for the world. And what I love about what you both saying is a real spirit of partnership, right? And companionship and not forcing a will or saving anyone, but just acknowledging that some of us have some privileges. And so therefore, of course, we are called, I think, to do open some doors, but it's a different, motivation. Now we will go though into the planning and understand, you see, when we think about the investment cycle, there is the idea, where does the idea of what to invest on comes from? Then we would go really, or the planning part, and then we would go into, okay, it's a whole preparation process, and then the financing happen. And I want through these podcasts that people to understand how decisions are taken. How do you come about the shape, the design, the elements of what you were going to do, for example, in that community, Samuel, or what you did in the first and in the next, and the actors behind it, the decision making. So could you tell us more about the rainforest water supply model? Which roles, disciplines, and stakeholders have played a crucial role to make it a success and sustainable over time?
Samuel, you wanna let me
Yes,
take this?
please. This is a new question.
And you can pop
Yep.
in. Yeah. Listen, the development of the WASH came from looking at an existing model, right, and making it work. So there's a planning stage in which we go into the communities, we develop a baseline, health and anthropological, and then we go on to build the infrastructure. We work with environmental engineering and sanitary engineers here in Peru. And so we're able to adapt models. We're working in the southeastern Peruvian Amazon. We're able to work with gravity. So we chose to work with gravity and slow sand filtration, which removes up to 99.99% of the bacteria, viruses, and cysts. We also implemented sanitation that was environmentally eco-friendly. We started off with IMHOF systems, anaerobic systems that naturally decompose waste without contaminating the environment. And then we moved on to biodigesters, which we adapted to work in the jungle because the way the biodigesters were being installed in the jungle, they were collapsing. And so our project engineer and project supervisor adapted the model from an existing Peruvian model that was really a great model called a biodigester. He adapted it so it would work in the rainforest. We also were the first to implement gray water drains. So not only did we deliver water to every home, the school, and the health post, we then processed that gray water underground, right? So that was the model. And so what we did was developing on those drains, how many people were in the house would determine the length of the drains. So we developed that water and sanitation model, and we tested it over time, and we knew it worked. Partnered with the health education and the hygiene practices. And the key role, Monica, was water committee members that build, maintain, and repair, and that every household paid a fee for their water access. And so they were invested. So that fee that they collected would then be used to maintain their system. That was the model. We developed it in Huacaria. The southeastern Peruvian Amazon wanted it. Communities were reaching out to us. We replicated it in 4 more communities in the Amazon, and then we went in the southeastern Peruvian Amazon. Then we went over to northern Peru and proved it there. But in the northern Amazon, it's flat, so we had to incorporate solar pumping systems. And so we just adapt the model. Each model is adapted a little bit differently depending on the environmental landscape of the communities.
Thank you so much. I mean, I really think, and although we will later talk about the regenerative design principles, but as I hear you talking, it's the design principle number 3 is innovative, adaptive, and responsive. And I think it's really exactly what you were explaining, right? And I think also how you bring all the different disciplines, right? But you bring indigenous knowledge hand in hand with environmental and sanitary engineering. So creating that level playing field. Now, maybe another question I have is, how do you choose and partner with others to move towards its implementation in other communities? I mean, you did mention some of it already. You also mentioned that this fine-tuned, but could you tell us very briefly, like, how are they designed and by whom? Like, for example, are the committee members, by the way, the whole of life cycle approach you have is awesome. Like, so many investments in water and sanitation over the world do not have that. I was part of the water governance review of Argentina, and Argentina is quite a developed place, but it was clear that wastewater treatment plants purification plants were also built and then not maintained properly. So after 2 years, they would collapse. And there are also studies that show how many wastewater treatment plants and water purification plants are not in function. So the fact that you have this whole of life cycle approach and also charge a fee, sometimes people are like, I think in the UN world, sometimes people are like, water is a global common good, it should be free, but there are the realities of how do you pay for maintenance. So I love all of that, what you were saying, but when you are designing those systems for the new community, for example, in the case, Samuel, maybe you can tell us how it was developed in the community that you decided to support. How does all that knowledge come, hand in hand? Is decided where it's located? I don't know. How does that process go?
So if you're referring to the water committee, how that process goes about, it's who's interested, who wants to be on this. And it's just creating more of that ownership model. If you own something, you're going to see it through. You believe that you can do it. It's just so synchronized with everything that Rainforest Flow does. So then you get the water committee members on board, then you can get a better idea of where to locate tanks, where to do this and where to do that. Nancy has a lot more knowledge on the technical side of things, but just big picture here, like that water committee is so integral to how the whole system works. Because then
So they are from the beginning.
Yes.
They are involved from the beginning. Oh, okay.
Yes.
That's amazing. That's perfect. Okay. Because sometimes also people thought of them after they built the thing. So that's great. And so now let's go to the other question. What is required of the regulatory planning, public procurement, and overall impact ecosystem for the model to be replicated and become mainstream? Or what's in the way right now for this to be replicated more and more in the rainforests in Peru and maybe other countries? But let's focus in Peru for now.
Well, first of all, our systems are in alignment with Peruvian water and sanitation regulations. The shift we've made with Rainforest Flows, we've stopped building with concrete. We now build our systems with portable geomembrane NSF 61 portable tanks, geomembrane tanks. And that is changing the way, because what we're talking 6 months to build concrete tanks, we can put up a water treatment system from 8 to 15 days. Just the water treatment. That's not collecting the material, building the retaining structure so it stays safe, right? And so we are in an alignment in Peru. There's these new geomembrane tanks are not listed on the approved technology for water structures, but they're allowed. Let's say these communities are in regulation. So what is now needed is more governmental partnerships, which we're working on, integrating our work with the local stakeholders, local, regional, and national stakeholders. And what I can tell you, Monica, is anyone looking at these systems thinks they're wonderful. And how do they gain access to them And just so you know that, everything is based, these are community elected water committee members. We don't go in there and dictate to them. But from the moment we enter into that community, those committee members or the community members that show up that have that desire to bring this change to the community normally go on to be the water committee members. And we have rotating members when we're in the building stage. They can see who's really interested. And then after we finish that implementation, after 9 months, you see this strong nucleus of men and women that want to focus on being water committees. So replicating this now is sharing it with the international NGOs, local NGOs, the Peruvian state, and to get them to adapt this model. That's the scaling process going on right now, because we know it works. Now it's how do we begin to scale it?
Yeah, just to jump on.
Yes, go on, Sam.
I'm just going to jump on with what Nancy's saying right there. There's no reason that this model can't work globally. And something that we're really trying to figure out right now is partnerships with larger NGOs, the United Nations, Norwegian Refugee Council, anybody like this who does, multi-problem solutions in troubled areas where wash is a need of yours. Our program will work, not just because the system itself is mobile, it cleans water, gives people a vital life resource, but also just kind of going on with what we've been talking about is the empowerment that comes through this model. And I think that's a huge need wherever these larger organizations work, is you're dealing with people who've had a really rough go in life, and they need to be able to see that they can make a go at things on their own. That's where I think the next step to the organization is let's share what we got going on with these larger folks who have the manpower and the resources to multiply this the world over and really see the effects from this program.
And before we go into the next question, what I think it's amazing is that normally another principle is that you should not kind of over maximize like one indicator, right? Like gross domestic products, right? And it's like about well-being. So many indicators. And I think your model, like you're saying, is more than water, right? And so it's also strengthening the social capital, because I think the crisis where we are is natural capital, but also social capital. The social contract is breaking in so many places. So regeneration, just to tell you, versus sustainability means that you're giving a little bit more back, right? Because the reality is that we have emptied so many of our stocks of natural and social capital that the fact that your model is kind of having a multiplier and strengthening those different capitals, I think is amazing. Maybe regarding your next steps and the center, and maybe I don't want to tell me, what are the next steps? With whom are you working to originate and leverage investments for this, what you believe is the next step also, besides replicating the model, the way you want to replicate it, and the role that center will take?
Okay, so we are moving from a project per project model to train the trainer model. There's more villages than we could ever hope to get to in our lifetime, right? We understand it has to, the Global WASH Training and Research Center is about sharing this model, right? And continuing to research the model so that, because not only do we have water systems, we have rainwater harvesting. And so what we want to be able to do is invite other entidades, we say, other entities to come in and learn from this model that has been proven over 20 years for remote rainforest areas. And as Samuel, sorry.
No.
As Samuel has said, it can work in any region. We can take this throughout the Amazon rainforest. We can take it to Indonesia, the Congo. We could take it to Africa. It works in, rainforest, coast, and mountainous regions. And so the idea is, how do we bring people together? We're now doing workshops where people can come and learn from us. We also can provide consulting where we could consult and on the installation of a water treatment system and supply the tanks with it. So we're really working on a place in which people can come to this, as Samuel said, with resources, then go off and take them back to their regions, their countries, their cities, and to build a nucleus that could supply these participants with technical knowledge to arrive in success in their projects.
Thank you. And I think we're getting to the next phase of the discussions with this about the funding and financing aspects. So I would like to go into those mechanisms, right? Because as you said, it has to be sustainable over time, both in every community, but also the model. So I would love to understand, Nancy, a little bit more about the structures and the rules of the game in terms of financial aspects. So could you describe how the current systems have been funded and how their long-term financial sustainability is secure? You touch upon households giving, paying a fee, but if you could tell us a little bit more, and what are some of the remaining challenges and gaps?
As these communities pay a fee, right, for the ongoing maintenance, the problem is when something big happens, where's the funds going to come from, for them to be able to fix that? I think that as we turn over ownership fully at the end of 2026 to the communities, we're going to monitor this and see how they do. We're now working very closely with them on how they build a structure of governance for their water systems that doesn't make them dependent on the outside world, but use their own resources to set up a fund, an emergency fund when something happens. But we're also working on the municipal level that what is their part when things go wrong? How do they step in with finances, right? So, Monica, we're monitoring that right now. And though we know that they can support it on a monthly, yearly level, when we disengage from them, we're now going to see, with the governance we've put in place, how far can they get? So we're going to have to monitor that over time, okay? Because right now, there is a big disconnect. There isn't emergency money to help these communities when something does go wrong, because the way the system works right now is they build it and they leave. They build it and they leave. And so there's not a mentality that says, how does this stay? How is the sustainability of this program over the long term? We have funded our organization by private funding and institutional funding over the years. That's the way we've been able to establish the model, right? But going forward, what's most important is that we begin to help the countries use their resources. And Peru now, when I first arrived, there wasn't money for WASH. There is money for WASH. So our work now is to establish a relationship within the Peruvian Housing Ministry and within the ministries, that how can our model help them bring water to the people? And that's really our work at hand.
Thank you. If I might reflect on the things you said, I think that it's about also influencing these procurement strategies, right, of local and regional governments. And that fits very well with your plans with the center, because it's more on getting those people to be part of this new paradigm of supplying water and sanitation. But that's something we could discuss more in the future. Is what about some insurance models, right? Because it has been tried for other things. So maybe as it become and is used in more and more communities, maybe there could be some insurance models for these large repairs that I needed. And maybe your emergency fund already is pulled across different communities, but that would be interesting to explore. Now, as I go into Samuel to ask you the questions, I would like to know, in your experience, in the case of Rainforest Flow, what type of capital do you consider crucial to support the upscaling of this model, right? So you're sitting as the president of the board and you're thinking, what do we need for this to get to the next phase?
So I'm just looking at capital that's going to create a catalytic response, a potent response to the organization. So right now, what I'm investing in is the administrative side of Rainforest Flow, because keeping Nancy and our VP, Maggie McDowell, to keep doing their thing, that's what's critical for Rainforest Flow. And then also looking at building out, we're looking at developing a kit program that we can market, I don't know if that's the right word, but send to other organizations that want to replicate this model and beyond. So right now, that's what I'm looking at. That's the most important capital, is building out this kit program so that we can multiply our effect, hopefully abroad, with these larger organizations.
And so in terms of when we would use the word capital, like even like kind of more wider than the money part, right? Like skills and so forth. What type of partners do you feel that would be essential for you to achieve that and be successful in this new phase?
So the partners that we're looking at are folks that are already working in the humanitarian sector. They might have larger project that they're working on with folks who are suffering from anything, if it's violence, if it's natural disasters. We're looking to partner with these larger folks who have the manpower that can take our system and put it in 20 different villages, 30 different villages, wherever they're working at right now. So I guess the capital that we're looking to partner with is folks that have the manpower to implement this at a larger scale than that we currently can.
Okay, that's amazing. That's great. What of the current model might drive or deter as we go on, right? Like on the next step, might deter regular investors, impact investors, or philanthropists to step in? Maybe could you explain us a little bit briefly, how you see the world as a philanthropist versus maybe where you would put a hat of another type of regular investor?
I think whenever you invest in anything, you're looking on the return that you get from your investment. So when I've worked with Rainforest Flow and other organizations, I want to see the thought process going into the model and then the results given to us from that work. And Rainforest Flow shows that in the studies from both an anthropological side, also from a health side, that you go into an area, they have chronic diseases. We bring in the system, you come back a few years later, test everyone, see if the diseases are still there. With Rainforest Flow, the diseases are eliminated. It's amazing. So I think the biggest thing that Rainforest Flow can do going forward is show the results of that program, of that system. And just working with large organizations, it's been interesting. They haven't been able to show the direct results that they're looking for in the same way that Rainforest Flow does. So what I asked of Rainforest Flow, so I guess I'm asking this of Nancy and myself, is let's go show the world in a bigger way what we've already done. That's what we have to do, is just show what we're doing a little better.
Amazing. Anything you want to add, Nancy?
That was spot on, Samuel. And we're small, right? And so how do we at this grassroots level grow and scale? But listen, we have the adaptability, we have the participation, we have, the place-based, it's designed for the environment. We have the health study, we have the 93% drop in chronic diarrhea within the first 2 years. We've got all that. We've got the collaboration, right? And so now it's really developing the partnerships that will grow the model, right? And that's really what the focus is, Monica, is we have reached out to partners here in Peru and in other parts of the world. And now it's really solidifying those partnerships and getting people to know that that investment in WASH and in a model that actually work is win-win for both their organization and the people and for the world. There we go.
I feel like it's almost like your whole model is based on partnerships, right? It's just that you're kind of bringing those partnerships to the higher levels of decision making and at the global level, right? So that's great. Now, I wonder we go, and maybe just to reflect a little bit back, Samuel, like in terms of impact investing, at the end of the day, also the real impact investors, maybe they are not impact washing, they will be also very triggered to invest in these systems because they have to show, for example, their corporations of others who are working in those bases who want to show what their netto effect is in that watershed, and WASH, access to WASH has a equivalent in what we call volumetric water benefit accounting, for example, right? Or they want to show, of course, impact on the community. So their results, I think to lead by the results will also open the door for other type of investors as you go along the way, and your theory of change, which is kind of the strategic business case for going in there. So one, how much flexibility and resilience is built into the design of the supply systems and their operative models? You already mentioned some, but if you want to add anything, and also maybe the decision-making that you have within the committee members to deal with changes and uncertainties?
The strength of our programming is the social adaptation to the WASH projects. Without the social adaptation, none of this works, right? And so the adaptability of our systems within climate change, the way we build our water systems is if something happens, if a stream dries up, if a river dries up, a mountain wants to fall down, our systems can be taken down, moved to stable ground, and rebuilt again. So it's the strength of building with these flexible geomembrane tanks. And also, I think that what's important is that the Indigenous people are involved in the decision-making process of the intervention in their communities, that they're not just bystanders here, that they are involved at all levels in which, programming is being brought to their regions and communities. I think that that's very important, and that's that regenerative part of what we do, Monica. And I think that there's a lot of technology in the world, but what the big missing piece is the social adaptation. And that if that doesn't change, if we don't stop throwing money at projects and leaving them, if we don't invest in the people according to their needs, I think that, we're going to keep this hamster on the wheel. So I think that Rainforest Flow has worked really hard to develop that model and position it now to scale.
I think, and that's not something that basically I think you have leveraged those deeper leverage points. So it sounds, like too repetitive, but there is, in the world of systems change, there is Donella Meadows that says that we can focus on shallow leverage or deep leverage. And shallow is like technology, right? Deeper is like what people value. And so your whole process is creating that valuing water and the service and so forth. And so if I had to summarize, I think there is a social adaptation part and the portable design, right? Which is make it very strong. I also think it makes a very strong case in terms of investments because these are not lost. If they have to be change of place, they can be reused. And most infrastructure investments, they are very specific to the place that you put them, right? And so it's a big risk. And you have overcome that risk. Now, let's go to the next principle, which you were already mentioning. It's empower participation. And what it means is not asking people what they want or helping them achieve what they want, but making them part of the solution and even almost shaping the problem definition, right? So that they can really contribute to their own solution. So to what extent, you have told us some about it, but is there anything you want to add? To what extent do different actors, local communities, public authorities, investors, operators have real agency in shaping these systems? And what makes working with Indigenous communities in the Amazon unique? How is that cosmovision that they have embedded in your model of delivery?
What I think is clean water is the entry point, but transformation is the outcome, right? We don't deliver solutions. We co-create them with the Indigenous leaders and communities that we work with. The forest and people are one living system that work together, right? And resilience is built locally. It's not imported, right? And that I think what's really important is it's not charity to them. It's a regenerative model in which they understand and can build upon and teach the world, right? So I think that it was really important that we taught the Peruvian Amazon teaches the Amazon rainforest, and the Amazon rainforest teaches the world. That was the big idea, and bringing in the local players, the local regional, to come on board, Monica, that the water, that WASH is the deepest investment any country can make in their people and the long-term sustainability and greatness that's achieved is by giving people their basic human needs.
Well, thank you so much. I want to take with me the phrase that you say that clean water is the entry point, but transformation is what you're after. It's very clear from the whole interview that that's also what's happening in these communities. I want to go to principle number 5 of regenerative design that says honors community and place. And we believe that a regenerative economy nurtures healthy and resilient communities and regions as you are doing it. each one uniquely informed by the essence of its individual history and place, right? Now, the question I have for you, Sam, if I might ask that one from you, is that what aspects of these systems you develop with community are fundamentally shaped by local context and culture and cannot be in any way standardized? And what might need or can have a standardization to enable two things: more capital flows into these systems, but also the upscaling of this model in other regions and cultures and contexts?
That's interesting. I'm going to kind of keep back to what we've already been talking about. It starts with these water committees. And I think that's something that is absolutely replicable. It doesn't matter if it's in Luis Terry, Peru, or if it's in Pemba, Mozambique. All of that's replicable. When you start with, a group chosen by the community to represent that community in the decision-making process, the community buy-in is going to be a lot more. It's going to be a lot more rich. You're going to actually see results of where you're trying to get to. So I think that's just the hypercritical factor in all of this. I'm sorry I'm a broken record on it, but I think that's what Rainforest Flow does better than anybody else, are these water committees and the community involvement and buy-in that comes off of that. So that would be my answer to your question.
No, it's amazing. No, it's great. I think that you have said that's essential. It's almost like the beginning wheel for everything else to happen. That's great. Now I want to go to not the last, but the last that we will discuss together, which is number 6, that is called Edge Effect Abundance. And it says that creativity and abundance flourish synergistically at the edges of systems, where the bonds holding the dominant pattern in place are the weakest, right? So, for example, we see that there is abundance of interdependent life in salt marshes where a river meets the oceans. At those edges, the opportunities for innovation and cross-fertilization are the greatest. So going back to Rainforest Flow, which partnerships across sectors or disciplines and types of knowledge have proved most generative in the development of this model? You have mentioned some of these aspects already throughout the podcast, but I would like to answer that question now so that people also seize this principle in practice.
The paramount partnership is with Indigenous people, cultures, and they become the advocates and the voice of water and the need of it in their community, right? That's, I believe, our primary partnership, working across sectors with the government, with NGOs that are doing the same things. Like, how do we begin to talk to each other? The Global Research Center will soon have a workshop where we invite other NGOs to sit down and let's talk and let's partner with each other so we're all not working in different directions, right? The scientific community, and most of all, it's the communities, Monica. That's what's really important to us. And the scaling will come in when we begin to have people willing to come outside of the norm, right? The conformity of how they're developing projects here, which is an old system in Peru that was developed in the Velasco days. Are there going to be the new generation of engineers and Indigenous, and governmental leaders that say, let's go, let's step out of this and let's replicate this on a larger level? And also international organizations as well have expressed interest to us, and they see the They see
replicability.
the replicability of this program, and now we're positioning ourselves to begin to put it in different sectors of the Peruvian Amazon and perhaps beyond into other countries right now.
And now comes a question. I do want you both to be quite open and candid about the response, because they are showing interest, they're coming in, you're having talks, but are there institutional or financial silos that limit this type of collaboration at the edges, this stepping into a new paradigm? Yeah, do you see some bottlenecks happening as you go deeper? And for example, in the case of the government, are there some of those silos that make them do poorer investment choices, right? Hindering the uptake of this more kind of cross-sectoral, holistic approach. So yeah, could you tell some of that? And I mean, you don't need to give names, but are there I don't know, you're talking to this person who believes very much in the model, but then the decision-making process is very siloed at the side. Anything you would like to share about this?
Normally investment, let's talk rainforest, right? The investment is minimal, right? It's rural. The costs are 3 times more than constructing in urban areas, right? And so we know when we are involved with these conversations with the Peruvian state or international banks, right? It takes time because their programming is always 1 year, 2 years, 3 years in advance. So now we're coming in and we're saying, hey, we have the answer. And so the only thing that I can say is we have interest. And now it's working with those actors to say, let's pilot. Okay, you've got a pilot coming up. It's 1 year in advance. How can we collaborate? What's Rainforest Flow's part?
Mm-hmm.
What's your part? And let's get these models set up and then they can replicate it. So it's being patient, Monica, to work within the system and then empuja, like push the system to go, let's go. Let's be proactive with this. And historically, Monica, there isn't large investment in rainforest areas in the world.
Okay.
And that is something there's conservation organizations invest hundreds of $millions into the environment and into land rights. And the basic essential needs of the people is still a low priority. So it's our work to raise the priority.
Right. To me, Monica, that's our biggest bottleneck right now is that there is a lot of investment in the environment, in the ecology, but there's not a lot of investment in the people who are living in the environment and taking care of the ecology. So I think when large organizations, whether it's money, whether it's manpower, whatever, when they see that the key to protecting these environments is to bettering the well-being of the people who are living there, then the light bulb's really going to go off. Then you're not going to just see you're not going to see our goal being accomplished, which is to provide them clean water, but you're going to see their goal being accomplished as well, as that will maintain a healthy rainforest, that will maintain a healthy ecosystem, is when we keep the people who are living there healthy.
I love what you're both saying, because actually that's why, I wanted to look at understanding, planning, and financing, right? Without the understanding, and I think it's a lot of our understanding has been clouded by being efficient and in a siloed, and you're saying, hey, no, to get to your goal, you have to start where it seems somewhere else. But
yes,
we lost that connectivity of thinking, right? Like we're very linear. And I love also, I think it's full circle from where you started, Nancy, because you wanted to go to the Amazon to understand how life works. And now you're trying to get people to understand how it
Samuel
works.
said it beautifully, Monica, beautiful, Samuel. Like human health and forest health are not separate. They're one system. And we've lost our connection. Like the Amazon regulates global climate that supports us all. Indigenous communities are the guardians of these amazing places, hotspots in the world. And it's just like, if they don't have their basic service, it almost seems like we're all at risk. So it sounds like, wow, let's that paradigm shift that, geez, we're one global tribe. And as we help, the indigenous people protect these areas that feed the world, we protect ourselves. Right? They're like, we invest in ourselves. We invest in them, we invest in ourselves. Isn't that beautiful?
But
Yeah.
good. Yeah. No, so amazing. Well, look, I want to give you very short to tell me, because of course there's so much richness in what you have done for the last 20 years, and you, Samuel, since you joined the last 5 years in this model. Are there any key lessons or practical advice you would share with others seeking to implement and finance similar transformational water and sanitation supply models, or bringing that transformation, right? Very short, because I want after to go to the call to action.
Listen, I think that, Monica, it's complex. I wish it was really easy, and I wish that people understood investing, right? And so I think the model is climate resilient and adaptable. Right. And isn't that what we're all looking for right now? In the model, there's no roads, there's no heavy infrastructure needed. There's no, you can build these things and you can put them all on a boat and get them to these communities, and they're portable, and a whole kit weighs anywhere from 160 kilos to 200. kilos, depending on the size of the community that we have to feed, it can be relocated in climate change. I mean, what systems do we know, right? So we've got this really, and it's socially adaptable, and it's got indigenous knowledge and technical engineering, and it supports public health and supports the health of the, of the world. So getting investors to, it's not even buy into it, to really get to the investors that are looking for this type of model and get it proven and piloted and bigger, meaning like in different parts of the world. And I call them light stations sometimes. You put one in the northern Peruvian and southern, you just get all these systems up and running and make sure they're sustainable, and then it will replicate itself. So right now, getting investment in it, they're showing promise to it. And now I think it's inviting more NGOs to come in and learn about it and see what is possible through our Global Teaching and Learning Center. I don't know if I answered that.
No, you
for
do.
you
You did very good. Thank you. And I think now we come to the part that if each of you had a magic wand and could change one thing, don't limit yourself. I was thinking maybe in the public procurement, the decision-making in the government and the private capital allocation models. But if you could change one thing in the systems surrounding you in Peru and globally to make investments in these regenerative infrastructure systems much easier, what would it be?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Nancy, do you have an answer for that off the top of your head?
Well, I got it. When I asked my Peruvian staff, why is this going on? They say there's a lack of consciousness. There's a lack of, I said, why do they allow these systems to be developed and not working? And they go, it just falta conciencia. They're like, there's a lack of consciousness, right? There's a lack of connection. And isn't this what this is all about? And what I'd like to see is an awakening of consciousness to the importance of our natural systems and the people that live in them, and that in their investment, which they're already doing, but failing at it, that they would want to have a deep desire to, God, do a job well, to take that money and to stop for those programs to stop failing, and for the pride in which comes from leaving this, the country and the world a better place. And that's what I'd like to see. I'd like to see that awakening of consciousness that says these people are important, this forest is important, we're directing our resources to them, and we will flourish, and then we're going to teach the world how to flourish through basic human needs.
Yeah, well said, Nancy.
So beautiful.
I guess kind of going off what you're saying there, my call to action to everybody involved in these humanitarian philanthropic fields is humility, which is interesting because we all have good hearts. We're all in this for the right reason, but sometimes we don't accomplish our goals because, and I know this is just, I'm talking about myself right now, is when I first went to the Amazon, I lacked some humility. And then when Nancy helped me break myself down and really listen to people and where they're coming from, your programs are going to be much more successful. So I think we can all take ourselves down a little bit and listen to others. I know that sounds hippy dippy. I'm sorry. I'm also a yoga teacher.
No, but it is.
So it comes out every now and again.
Thank you.
But the more that we listen, I think the more that we learn and the more we accomplish together.
Thank you so much. I think I was just reflecting that what you were both saying, but also Nancy, when you were saying, it's almost like if we need investors to take their job more seriously, right? I mean, it's like they have to become better at their investment decisions, right? It's just,
that's beautiful.
But the understanding, it's where, and I think where Rainforest Flow has some work to do. I want to thank you both so much. I didn't tell you earlier, but I'm looking really forward to also, hopefully meet there in this more on a personal note, which might not go into the podcast, but I was raised by my mother, which is a single mother, but also a Dutch stepfather who is an anthropologist who worked actually also in Peru and Mexico. So it's quite, I don't know. It feels like a full circle moment to be with you too and learn about this. And looking forward to continuing this work together. Thank you for listening to Investing in Regeneration. But before you go, if this conversation sparked new ideas for how we understand, plan, or finance projects, I invite you to take one small step today. Leave a rating and a review. It helps this podcast reach the people who are shaping decisions. And please share this episode with a policymaker, a planner, an investor, or anyone who has the agency to influence how projects are originated, designed, and financed. This is not just about spreading a podcast. It's about joining a quiet revolution, reimagining finance, and embracing a new investment paradigm that reconnects people, nature, and the economy, and places finance at the service of life.